Like, I see worship in terms of how we live. And so everything that flows out of relationship with Jesus, I think, like, it's got to be considered worship, you know. So, I mean, I guess it starts with obedience, you know, like God expects and requires obedience and loves it more than sacrifice. And so I think it's a life that's like devoted and dedicated to God. Like the worship experience when we come together and we gather like as a group and we sing, it's really just a representation of hopefully like a life lived and an obedient life. Like the living sacrifice thing is a life of obedience, doing what you know and you feel God's calling you and asking you to do. I think there's an element in sacrifice of, like I really see things in terms of initiative and putting yourself out there as well. So you feel like God's given you something and then you put it all on the line for God in a way and go out there and stretch beyond what you'd normally do. I think sometimes people think of sacrifice in terms of I've got to kind of give away all my money or I've got to go down to the worst area of town and kind of feed the homeless and all that. And I think it involves that, but I think that what's God given me and how am I going to extend myself and throw everything into what God's given me to be faithful and effective in that. And as a living sacrifice, I think you know, in our day and age, like being entrepreneurial with what we've got, having initiative, putting yourself on the line, doing all those things as a servant, you know, and in that kind of mind, I think that's kind of what it's all about. And it's what it is for me anyway. I think everyone's got to be challenged with how do you stay inspired? How do you keep, you know, your life good? How do you keep fresh? How do you keep up? And I think it's all in terms of what you're feeding on, what you're putting into yourself. And so I'm real conscious always of what I'm reading. Like I've got a plan of what I'm reading, what I listen to, you know, like what kind of preaching or like audio books, or always finding good stuff, like good music that I love to listen to. I always think in terms of how am I feeding myself so that I can give out. Because I think an inspired person, like an inspired life, reproduces and creates inspiration. And without that, I think you really quickly become dry, especially like every night we're up and we're leading worship and all of that. I'm gonna make sure that that there's good stuff coming into me, because you're constantly in a position where you're giving out, which is what you want, but at the same time you've got to be real full of good things. I think what we do and a concert is completely different, not even to be seen in the same terms. I really think in terms of how we're going to build the church. What are we doing that's contributing and building the church globally and locally? And so when we get up, my mind is always whatever we can do to help people worship, whatever we can bring, you know, like to help people sing and lift. And so I think in terms of what have I got that I can bring that's me, that's going to help people. And get them worshiping, because I think that if you can get a body of people worshiping, it allows people to be in a position where they get blessed and God refreshes and that whole thing. So I really think in terms of when we go places, we're building and just believing for God to water and bring His blessing on churches to help grow that whole thing. So the difference between what we do in a concert is we're not there to perform, we're there to put into people and I love concerts. I'm real into concerts. I love it, but we're just not doing that. We're there to get to come alongside people and kind of give them tools to help them connect with God. Probably my favourite at the moment is one that I wrote about 6 weeks ago, which is called "Mighty to Save," and I love it because it's new and it just seems to go. You know, it's just one of those songs and that people sing. Another one that I really love is "What the Lord Has Done in Me," just because of the story behind it. I wrote it for my brother, wrote it for his baptism, and his story is just a real great one. He came out of addiction and had a real hard time with that. And you know, obviously, like as family, you go through that. You know, when it's your brother or something like that. So when he came out and he's like, I want to give my heart to the Lord and I want to get baptized and stuff. I think this is just a brilliant story, and he's a pastor now and all of that. So I think that song is really testimony to what the Lord can do. I started listening to Vineyard music, like the early, the days of Vineyard, and so like I remember just going to school and listening to the Vineyard tapes and whatever, and like kind of learning how to worship with that. With those sounds and those songs, and I kind of feel like that's my heritage. Although my parents are Christians and grew up in a Baptist church, and kind of I have all those songs in my ears. It's power in the blood, and turn your eyes upon Jesus, and those songs. I feel like they're really in my history, but as well the Vineyard. And I moved to Hillsong in '95. I started going to Hillsong Church, and I guess like that environment like taught me heaps about local church and building church and the new song and kind of what happens with that whole thing. And so I think a lot of what I've learned about worship and worship leading and all of that comes from Pastor Darlene Check and Brian Houston, and just being part of that team and that whole movement as well. The thought behind World Through Your Eyes is mountaintop experience. Like you're there with God and the whole worship experience, like creation's crying out to God. You've got the whole thing happening, and you're at the point where you got to go and live as well. Like I love those moments where I'm on my own. I like being in nature. I like kind of getting out and kind of getting amongst it. But you always come to that point where you got to go home. You got to kind of do stuff, and I guess the prayer is like on the way home, like, let me see the world through your eyes. Like I don't want to just have this experience as separate to my life, but I want to be changed by it, and I want to see the way, I want to see things the way God sees, and kind of let it change me. I think that like the act of worship where I connect with God, I remember and I refocus on God, like that kind of worship is just essential. It's like I think it's the central part of our lives, like where we can come and devote ourselves again and commit ourselves again and then live out of that. I think is just vital, it's central, and I think it always has been, that devotion where we can actually experience God's presence and know Him and connect with Him and allow Him to speak to us in that communion. I would always say, like, don't throw away your confidence. Just keep persevering. Like, no matter what you believe God's given you and put in your heart, believe and keep stepping into it. Don't let anybody or anything, any circumstance make you draw back. Just keep moving, keep pushing forward, keep pressing in. Because it's the people that keep their confidence, it's the people that persevere, that get there, that succeed. And they're rare people, but it takes strength when it doesn't, feel like it, when you don't want to, and when everything's coming against you and you cop criticism. Just be confident and just persevere.